Yeah, I flew in from San Antonio last night. That's one good thing about my job is it's virtual, so I can be anywhere and do my job. It's the fun piece of today. So what we're going to get into today is really more on the for-profit side, because based on our conversations, you already have a very good wealth of knowledge on the, yes, for the colleges and universities on that side. So a couple of different things that we look at here, you know, your nonprofit versus your for-profit. Before we even answer this one first, a couple of thoughts. You know, what are some of the things you think of when you think of the for-profits, private for-profits? What things come into your mind?
A vocational school, more or less, just like a trade school.
Okay, definitely follow those, fall into the category. What else?
Expensive.
Okay,
Expensive.
We need leadership voices. Yeah, I'm from here. Yeah.
What other things?
Online platforms.
Definitely, online platform.
Easier to get into.
Yeah, it could be, depending. You know, because some private schools that are for-profit could be your top standard schools. So it really depends, but for the most part, yeah, you're correct. Anything else? Yep.
Shareholders and enhanced marketing departments, big marketing departments.
Yeah, and all those are correct, and those are all the things that we're going to talk about tonight. The biggest thing from my point of view, so I started as an enrollment counselor at University of Phoenix back in 2000. From there, worked about a year and 2 months enrolling students, and during that time when you went to school there, when you worked there, school was free. So finished my bachelor's there, my MBA, and almost another master's in education and adult education and training. And one of the things I've been wanting to do for a long time is what you guys are doing now, but with my work and moving so much because of my work, I haven't been in one spot long enough to really do that, and I want that classroom environment because I've done both, and I feel you get a lot more, for me, out of the classroom. So from there, I went to the Cypress Creek University of Phoenix that opened up that learning center as the enrollment manager there. Was there about a year and a half. From there, went up to Tampa to run the University of Phoenix's in St. Petersburg and in Tampa, and part of the team that opened up the other 3 campuses in that area. After about probably 16 to 18 months, they asked me to move to San Antonio to open up the University of Phoenix in San Antonio. And at that time, there was a staff of probably 8, and we were working out of an Omni hotel, getting everything going with the big marketing machine behind us. Was there for about 3.5, 4 years, grew the campus from 0 to about 3,500 students in that 3 years. After that, decided to go into a different type of student, and that's where I joined with Education Management Corporation, which is the head parent for the Art Institutes. So I opened up the Art Institute of Austin, which was extremely fun, totally different type of student, exciting. You have a totally different world. Was there about 2 years, grew that to be the biggest new opening of an Art Institute in the history of the school. And from there, went to the Art Institute of Phoenix, which had not been successful in over 10 years. They called that the job killer, because everyone that went there failed. And went there, turned that school around, won all of the potential awards, things of that nature that you can't win at a not-for-profit school. Then from there, moved back to Florida and worked with Global Health Education as a National Director of Admissions. And that was part of a different model, which was we actually worked with schools that were in the red that could not actually afford to build an online platform, but were in your sector. So they were not a not-for-profit. They were a not-for-profit, and they were like a Florida Atlantic University, for example. How much do you think it costs if you want to, your school, and you want to add an online program? From the beginning, thoughts about how much that costs? Say again?
I would say a couple hundred dollars.
You're close. So first, what you have to do is decide which program. Then you actually have to build the entire LMS, which is the online classroom. So you're talking about probably like $250,000 to $500,000 to get started. Then you have to take every single syllabi for every single program and translate that into an online format to be able to deliver. Then from there, you now need a 24/7 staff, which you can do here, or you can get out of the country, which is less money. Now you have an entire IT department that you need to help students. So when we're talking about everything, you need to have probably $1.5 to $2.5 million set aside to do your first program launch. So if a school, and there's a lot of small schools that are not-for-profit that have maybe 1,300 students, and especially as the for-profit model grew and grew and grew, it took all those students away from those schools. So they needed to get into the game. But how do you get in the game if you don't have the $2 million? So that's where the birth of the type of corporations that actually partnered with. So at Global Health, what we would do is we actually built the entire online program for the school. We did all the admissions, all the marketing, all the financial aid, all of the academics, everything. Pretty much we used their accreditation and their financial aid, and then we did a revenue split at the end. So now the school had zero liability dollar-wise, and now is having students entering the program, and they're getting money versus having to outlay money. So there's a couple different models out there. Academic Partnerships out of Dallas partners with about, I think, 85 different colleges. They actually do FIU's MBA program. So really big business, even in the not-for-profit space. Those are ways that they can angle out. After that, did some consulting as well. Then was the Vice President of Admissions and Marketing for Antonelli College, which our online division was in Chicago, campuses in Mississippi, as well as in Ohio, downtown Cincinnati. And then in March, transitioned to my position now, which is the VP of Sales for High Intent Marketing, where now I sell to schools versus being in the school. So that's just a little rundown on me, and as you can see, each of those little changes, I only worked for about 4 different companies, but I've lived in about 9 or 10 different places. So fun, sometimes, some of it not. So with that, anything else that comes to your mind for I keep getting the for-profit, not-for-profit. Let's just say the proprietary schools, it'll be easier. Anything else that comes to mind when you think of that? Now, if you would say, by a raise of hands, if you have a positive or negative thought of them in general, if you have a positive thought, raise your hand. Negative? Okay. And give me 1 or 2 reasons why that you have that strong negative feeling.
I would say accreditation and transfer equivalency of courses to other institutions.
Yep, and that's a great point, because there's a couple of things that happen. If you're a regionally accredited school, you're a regionally accredited school whether you're FAU, USF, or University of Phoenix. All the credits are the same. It's up to the receiving institution whether they'll transfer or not, but it's the same. If you go to a nationally accredited school, that's where your differences come in. So everyone generally lumps all of them together. I believe one of the first things you had said was trade schools, where you have your Strayers, you have your DeVrys, you have your University of Phoenixes. Those, they transfer. Things are, just the same as a school that's not proprietary as well. What other negative things?
Less rigorous programming.
Definitely hear that. Has anyone here gone to any of the schools I just mentioned?
Florida Career College.
Say again?
Florida Career College.
Okay, and what was your experience there?
I went to school for like a month and I owed like $6,000 something. It was expensive.
Yep. Vocational type.
And then it was unfair because I worked so hard, but everybody had an A in the class when they didn't know anything. So.
Yeah, and there's such a huge spectrum of the worst vocational schools to the best bachelor's, master, doctoral level that are all in that space. But what is it that every single person in this room did right away when we talked about, do you have a positive or negative thought? The negative is what goes up. Because in the news, that's all that's covered. That's all you hear. You don't hear about any of the success stories. You know, at one time, and I don't know if now, that person that ran security for eBay graduated from the University of Phoenix. So there's more and more of those types of things we can talk about, but there's also tons of people that go to the tech school that get rushed in to get started because the school needs to hit certain numbers, and two things happen. Everything is done over with the student. Is it enough time for the student to actually take it all in? Probably not. And then the student doesn't know everything, remember everything, and then they later will know that's not what I was told. But 95% of the time there's a form that they sign that specifically said what their complaint was, that they knew. So it's the same type of thing if you buy a car. If the price is right and the term is right, do you read everything or not? Most people don't. Some people do. Depends on the person. Me personally, if you tell me my car payment's X and that's what I want it to be, I could care less about all that stuff. So just wanted to really get that background out there so you can think about it, because it's a much more broad area than people think. So, the next one. So what's the motivating factor? You know, first of all, you would think definitely money first for your for-profits, right? And for your not-for-profits, what would you think? Education. What did we just hear 45 minutes ago that your instructor is talking about? Money. And here we are at a not-for-profit state school, and there's money that's important too, because every school needs money regardless. So when we look at this, the main differences between your governance, is what we're going to talk about. So it's going to scope down very specific to that. I wanted to start more broad, so that way we can get into that. One second. So when you look at the two things here, the number one thing that we look at for your for-profit, they have shareholders they have to answer to. However, they can be more nimble. There's more things that they can do and choices they can make, whereas your not-for-profit has a board of trustees and there's guidelines. It's more run by faculty and staff, whereas the senior management of, depending on the school, of generating X for shareholders is the main decision maker. So who's in charge? We talked about this, and I gave you guys in your packets, and you don't have to look at it right now, but pretty much EDMC, Education Management Corporation, as well as University of Phoenix, they also have boards, and they're for-profits. It's just a matter of what is their function. The CEO is the person who truly runs everything and makes the decisions, where the executive level up here works with the management level down here at the campuses closely. So that way they're able to make an impact, make changes, and do anything they need to do to be successful. Whereas with the Board of Trustees, it's not that way. At a not-for-profit, you have your board, there's protocol, there's a meeting on X date, versus at a for-profit, we have a bad week. I get on the phone, I'm the CEO, with every campus president in my, say, 60 or 70 schools, and one by one ask them what they're doing different this week to make sure they hit their numbers. So when you're talking about being able to be nimble, changes, and make it happen, those are some of the differences as well. This is for-profits, the real goal is how many units they can move, in this case we're talking students, and the growth. where can they grow, how many they can grow by, and really from there build more money for the shareholders, right? All right. So this is from, I believe, let's see, 2010. And it's interesting because in 5 years, things have changed so much. So what this is Apollo Group owns the University of Phoenix. Career education is AIU. They have an art college. I can't remember the name right now. They are also Colorado Technical University as well. Corinthian colleges, you guys have seen them in the news recently?
Yes.
They're defunct now. They're not there anymore. On top of that, education management, that is your Art Institutes, Argosy, South University, and you have DeVry, which also owns Carrington College, Chamberlain College as well, and on. So this really talks about how many campuses they have in the largest 50 cities in the U.S., largest 250, internationally, total locations. So if we go back one slide, the growth in volume and in unit margins, go ahead. This is how we do it. We have to find new areas that we can put campuses, that we can find more students, and find a way to do it better than it's done there. And the reality is, until the not-for-profits decided to actually make changes, if you wanted to go to Florida Atlantic for your doctoral, like everyone here has, who is responsible for getting everything done?
Student.
How many of you had somebody call you every couple of days to make sure you're all set, ready to go? How many called you if you didn't have a form in to make sure you knew your deadline? No one, right? It was all on you 100%. Now, some students are able to do that. You're all in this class. Obviously, you can. On the flip side, someone that's working, that's doing, that has that person now calling them, hey, by the way, don't forget, I just emailed you again the form that you forgot to fill out and that one more reference we need. Okay, great, you'll be able to get it to me by now, by that time? Perfect, I'll call you at this time. Okay, here's your next step. Okay, now I'm going to have you talk to Donna in finance, and she's going to walk you through step by step everything you have to do for finance. So it's a matter of someone walking you through every single piece, giving you the best customer service you can possibly think of, instead of you doing everything yourself. So now let's scale that down back to, if we look at a 50,000 foot view of your community colleges. Students first time going to school, maybe they're adult learners, depends. But that's where that big competition comes in. Now, there's certain things that people look at, and we're talking about outcomes, really, really big. Would you say that a community college that has a 5% graduation rate is doing well?
Nope.
But why in legislation and all of the things that are going on in the news, why is that not in the news? Because it doesn't make sense to be in the news, because they'd rather talk about the for-profit school that has a 45% graduation rate and missed the 50% goal by 5. And that's really where your big top-level view is. Because it's all in Washington and old money, old education, brick and mortars, versus the new schools. And the difference here is all those schools look at each other as competition. Whereas FAU, USF, UF are all in the Florida system. They've made the Florida numbers. You can do your community college, then transfer over. They work together and pool all their resources so they have a much bigger hand and are able to stay on top of everything and control what the media deciphers and goes over. Any questions? Yes.
What does the Kaplan fall in?
Say one more time.
Kaplan.
Kaplan is,
The Washington Post.
yeah, but on here they're not on this one. Yep. Any questions on this? Any reason that, or any doubt in your mind of why University of Phoenix was able to get to 596,000 students?
We're the first ones to do it.
Yeah, and they have 260 locations. Now keep this in mind. For every location, they also have 3 to 5 teams of 10 advisors doing just online in those areas, as well as another probably 1 to 2 teams in every part of the country.
And they also have a stadium name after them.
Yeah, and it was the best marketing move ever. Do you know what that cost them? I actually was there in Phoenix and was part of the tour when we actually named the stadium and had the party for the school. It's $1.3 million per year. They're guaranteed X amount of Super Bowls. They're guaranteed X amount of national championship games. Fiesta Bowl every single year. Every single Arizona Cardinal game. All the concerts that come. In the contract language, there's at the Super Bowl, their stadium has to be mentioned 57 times. If you actually went, no, I'm just letting you know.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to have 2 commercials in the Super Bowl, how much does that cost? It's about $3 million per commercial for 30 seconds. So you're talking about they have 2 ads plus 57 mentions of their stadium, and they have all that on one day for $1.3 million for the whole year. One of the best marketing moves they ever made. Because once they made that move and they went to phoenix.edu, they turned off millions in marketing dollars and the leads increased. So great point to bring that up. Any other questions on this? Thoughts? Nope. All right. So here are the real big differences with your governance for your for-profit and not-for-profit. Now, and this is all going to focus on the for-profit. And this is now diving into specifically where you guys are. Invest personally in their institutions. So the senior management, they're generally either the CEO, they could be the investors. They have a strong, strong tie to the school and the school's success to be able to make more money. Big, big difference. Guide and direct strategies and substantial control of internal operations. What I just give the example of before. At University of Phoenix, every week we had a meeting with 360 directors of admissions on the call, going over numbers. And in San Antonio, fortunately, it was a great location, brand new, open. 2 years in a row, won the award for #1 in the entire company. So that was a fun time. But then you have probably about 14% of that number at or above their goal for new students, and 80 to 86% below. And those calls aren't fun for those people. But if for some reason the new spring class or fall class of FAU comes in lower, okay, it's lower and everything goes on as it does and more people will come. If you go to a college fair, you know the for-profit and not-for-profit very easily. If nobody had a name on any table, with 99% certainty I can tell you which is which. If you go and you look at the tables with the 2 people sitting behind it, that's your not-for-profit, because they couldn't care less really if they fill out a form. Your for-profit standing in front, handing things out, giving things, because they need you to come to school so that way you're a lead, you go to school, you're an enrollment, and then you start school, and now they're able to be successful. That's your difference. The hustle versus, I really don't have to. You need to come to us. Big difference. The strategies through mergers, acquisitions, and selling off parts. When we go over this in a little bit more depth, I'm going to give you an example of something we were able to do at the school that I was at, the Vice President of Admissions and Marketing, to ensure that our 90-10, which I'm not going to get into depth on that, but pretty much financial aid wide for a nationally accredited school, 90% of your money can come from financial aid funds, 10% has to come from other places. Whether it's military, whether it's cash payments, whether it's tuition reimbursement, things of that nature. And also promote growth by attracting added investments, capital, and really the options that are out there to go forward and what is there for them. So let's talk first here, owning part of the organization. They have an extreme equity in the organization. Generally, they're a smaller schools, they're the investor. So they can make sure they're making more money because it's their money now. So it makes a huge difference. Right here also, the long run performance and profitability. We need to make sure we're making the right moves for now and further. And if we think back a couple of slides ago, that model, at University of Phoenix, when I worked there back in the day, there was campuses opening everywhere. If you did well and you wanted to be a director of admissions, a campus president, you just needed to do well and be open to moving. And that growth is what also made it crumble. But that's something that you have there. And then also the incentives, they're close to what the goals are. And what I mean by that, their approval is not by a board, it's by the same person that's the investor. So as you look at it, it's almost as if Aaron Rodgers is deciding how many quarterback touchdown throws he's going to throw tonight and approving that number too. All right? So if we look, any questions on any of this, guys? Is this in line with what you've talked about on the other side of it? Okay. All right. So when we look at the operational control, the things that come to mind when I was an enrollment counselor way back, there was an email that went out every single day with how many applications everyone had for the week. And if you had 10 by the end of the week, you were on the big email, the great email. Well, the thing that was behind that was the senior VP of admissions at corporate, part of his bonus structure was he got $1 for every application. So he could care less how many people started. He pushed and pushed and drove applications. So when you're talking about if we had 350,000 starts, probably had 700 to 800,000 people apply. It's a nice bonus, and it aligns nicely with that. And so an example of that. Direct control over internal departments and divisions, extremely important. You're looking at faculty, you're looking at your admissions, you're looking at your financial aid department, and in your four not-for-profits, academics runs the train. They're what boost and push everything because everything is about the student. Now, with that being the case, they don't have the opportunity to do anything other than meetings, board meetings, state regulation, things of that nature, whereas and I'll give you a good example, there's a for-profit school that's being investigated now. I'm not going to say the name. Okay, I'm not going to say the name, but pretty much what their situation is, they decided to let whatever the balance was due after what loans were covered, they did loans for the students that they could take out through them at a low interest rate, and everyone was approved. Well, pretty much they knew that the return on that was going to be 2% or less of what they'll be getting back money-wise, but still did it because they'd rather get the $58,000 that they got over the 3.5 years than nothing. And maybe some of the people will call them back. Go ahead, next one. Now, the institutional controls. This I just wanted to put here because this is just gives you a contrast for the traditional institutions. You guys have a set of practices under which the college faculty and staff participate in significant decisions concerning the operation of the institutions. That's the bylaws in general, how it works. Nothing at all like that on the other side. Now, buying and selling parts of the organization. If I have 5 brands in my college, and the ones in Wyoming are not doing well, and there's another company that wants to have my accreditation and doesn't want to do the whole startup and wait 3 years, well, they'll buy those from me. So now I sell them off, everything's good, no problem. If FAU launches a campus in wherever, if it's not doing well, they can't just sell it to somebody. On the flip side, they can purchase things as well. And like I was saying earlier, the school that I was vice president of admissions marketing, the 90-10 rule, we were at about 92%. You need to be at 89.999 or lower. Well, in November, we bought a trucking school. And the trucking school only gets cash. So that infusion of cash for the whole entire year now goes into our numbers, which then brings us to 89.8. And now we're in where we need to be regulation-wise.
To get the financial aid.
To get the financial aid and break no rules. And that's all in the rules. So the other big piece here, going public. Senior managers can attract capital if they're smaller by getting more and more investors and getting more money that way. But the big picture always is to grow, 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 grow. IPO, the people who do it, shoot through the roof money-wise. Who's the richest person in the state of Phoenix? Dr. John Sperling. He's who is the founder of University of Phoenix. He's passed in the last couple of years, but his 2 sons or 3 sons, they're in the top 4 or 5 richest people in the state and in the top 25 in the country. Just interesting stuff. Now, differences in governance, the organizational practices, incentives lead to differences between for-profits and traditional colleges. And this next part is based on regionally accredited schools, and we're going to wrap up everything right now so you guys can see the main 3 areas that make the difference and bring it all together. Number 1, you have centralized programs, curriculum, HR, development in for-profits. University of Phoenix, everything is at Phoenix and it's sent out to the campuses. So if you're in Idaho, you're in Florida, wherever, everything is taught the same program, same books, same syllabi, same everything. Whereas here, decentralized decisions by department faculty in traditional colleges and universities. The first big difference. 2, the programs are designed to attract employers, local, national, international, because they need to place the students, versus here, it's solely done to attract students because of school, give back to the community, what you guys were talking about earlier. And the last one, integrated systems of student recruitment, program advising, and academic support versus functionally specialized departments. So what that means is the huge marketing machine that if you click on a button that says you're interested, how many calls when you inquire at FCC did you get? Florida Career College.
A lot. Even after stopped going there, they called for like a year.
Yep. And did anyone here, if you asked for information about this program, ever get 1 call?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay, so from FAU?
Yeah.
Okay, so 1 person. That still shows you the percentages.
Right.
Any questions?
Could you just repeat the, sorry.
Here, go back real quick. I'm trying to speed up at the end because I know of the time, Phil.
Could you repeat I guess you said the 90-10 financial aid rule again?
Sure. The way it works is that the federal government, if you are, as an institution, able to get funds, 90% of it can come from financial aid through the government. 10% has to come from somewhere else. Military, it could be cash payments, it could be tuition reimbursement from students, it could be some organizations do where they'll do what's it called? It's the form and they'll pay for you, direct pay from the company. So that way 100% of the money can't be from financial aid through the government, 90% is the most.
And the reason for that, just a little bit of background, and we'll cover this when we take finance and education, which the doctoral students take, and many of you have not had yet. But the rationale for that, it came really out of some concern about proprietary schools, quite honestly, and the high default rates. And it was the government's attempt in some respects to say, okay, you're not going to get 100% financial aid. You're going to have to get some of this money from somewhere else. So that's kind of background. We'll get into that more when we have finance.
Any other questions on anything? And I'll also make sure that you guys have a copy of the PowerPoint So that way you can look at those, yes.
We have 5 minutes for questions, so.
Okay, 2 questions. One, you said $1 for every applicant
Mm-hmm.
for the bonus for the vice president,
Mhm.
and 700,000 applicants
Mm-hmm.
per year.
That year.
That year,
Mhm.
and that's bonus on top of salary.
That's one of the bonuses he had.
Okay.
And the reason I know this is when I was the National Director of Admissions at Global Health, I actually hired him as a consultant. He worked for me. And we talked about all the different things. And every single thing that he always pushed, the rationale behind it.
Mhm. Okay. Second, so about the persistence for applications, in like your rationale was that people are busy, they're professionals, and it's just not a priority. In my mind, I'm just wondering what that means for them being able to prioritize their study if they're in the similar like responsibilities. Is that same persistence for applications? Is that mirrored once they're admitted in terms of student support services?
You know, it depends on school. Some of the schools, you'll be assigned an academic and a finance advisor that are calling you every single 4 or 5 weeks. So they're proactively doing everything they can to keep you in school, and before things happen or about to, giving you those options. So generally what you're looking at, University of Phoenix, I'll use them for example, and these are rough numbers, I don't remember the exact. Before they opened Axia, which was a community college online, there was a New York Times article, and I believe that the way that the definition is someone starting school the first time and graduating within 1.5 times of the normal. I think they were at like 4 or 5%. However, that was with the associate part. When you looked at the graduation rate differently, not first-time students, it was 35 or 45%. And nationally, community colleges, do you know what the graduation rate is at community colleges on average? Say again?
Did you say 5?
Well, no, that was one horrible one.
Specific.
60%?
It's about 15 to 19% on average throughout the country, and the reason being, you have students that are taking one class at a time, you have people returning. Your state schools are anywhere from 45 to 55 on average throughout the country as well.
And that's high.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? I appreciate you guys listening to me babble for a little bit.
This was a wonderful perspective, I think. That's a great perspective. Thank you very much.
You guys